The key drivers for a organization to adopt BPM, one is there has to be that need or a business case to pretty much drive the adoption for a BPM in the first place.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And if you've been following the series, then welcome back to another episode. If it's your first time, welcome. We've got over 120 episodes that we have recorded to date, and we received a lot of fantastic feedback from the community, a lot of people connecting and collaborating and sharing best practices and ideas. So I really encourage that. We've created this series for you guys to learn more about the topic of business process management, and not just in theory, but let's learn from those that are actually putting BPM into practice day in and day out. If you've been following the podcast series on whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, on any of the different channels, it would be fantastic if you could give us a rating, give us a review. That will help the podcast get out to more and more people that are interested in this information. So I just wanted to say that. But in today's episode, the absolute privilege of sitting down with Chirag Shah. Now, Chirag is a business analysis team lead for a large superannuation company. Now, that's right now, but he has also been in a similar role at other large superannuation companies. So he knows the super game and how process plays a significant part, better than probably most people. So really excited for this conversation. Chirag, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
So one question I have, and it's a question I ask at the start of every episode because the audience wants to understand the context for the rest of our conversation. What's your background? Where'd you come from? How did you get started in this space of business process management? Are you formally trained? Did you stumble into it? And take us on a bit of a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
Sure. So my journey pretty much started roughly around 15 years back. I started off working as a quality analyst for one of the retail super funds. As part of quality analyst, I used to assess and analyze the business process data, which comes out as an output. During that process, when I do go into an analysis phase, I kind of got into an opportunity where I thought there are some rooms for improvements within those processes, looking at the data that's coming out. That led to a conversation in becoming a customer experience analyst, which went into kind of a deep dive mode into understanding the actual processes, which the process is focusing on the offshore side of it. So back then, the retail super fund had offshored all their back-end processes. That led me to analyze all the processes at that space, which then evolved into improving them throughout the journey, and also led to my doing or getting a certification in Greenbelt, which, of course, as part of to pass through the certification, you have to do an exercise or a use case on a process improvement and picking up a process. So that's the kind of my journey, which kind of led my interest and journey to process management. Eventually, from there, moved on to another organization, again, pretty much in business improvement space. That led to establishing a robust process framework with having Six Sigma as a toolkit, then that led me to another organization where I was heavily involved in pretty much establishing a business process management framework that included from the scratch, pretty much tools, templates, processes, methods, complete uplift of competencies, bringing in new toolkit And that's where my journey kind of went on and on. And
That's
here I
great.
am.
That's fantastic. So obviously you would know better than me that in everything that we do in organizations, it's a process where we follow a sequence of steps or tasks or activities to deliver value, to get stuff done ultimately. And some organizations recognize that and others don't. And I guess when an organization understands their need to or firstly that they do have processes. There are processes in every organization and they need to be managed well. Then there are, I guess, different motivations or different drivers to manage those processes. So what would you say from your experience drives an organization to manage their processes, to adopt this business process management practice? Obviously, there are a wide range, but what do you see as being the most significant or most important ones?
Look, I can probably give you a few points that the key drivers for a organization to adopt BPM. One is there has to be that need or a business case to pretty much drive the adoption for a BPM in the first place, right? But also, if you look at the micro information, there might be gaps between customer facing and operational teams. So pretty much you are closing the gap between these two areas. And that's one of the reasons to adopt as well. And also it overcomes a lot of barriers in terms of business performance improvement and innovation through adopting BPM. And also improves the collaboration between customers, employees, your external vendors, suppliers. And one of the things also is to make sure that, there's a lot of disconnection in many organizations is between the data and the process side of it. So the key driver is to how do we bring this together? Because data plays a very important role when it comes to business process management. So it's not only about creating designs, it's about how do we understand data behind the processes. Once that, and of course, processes, the other requirement to adopt a BPM tool is to understand what the process metrics is, because we sometimes embark on a journey where we just design a process or a model a process and just leave it at that. But what do we, if we measure, we can manage better, right? So it's the metrics and all to do with, once you have those metrics, then you can work towards, okay, how do we bring in efficiencies? How do we reduce waste? Things like that. So some of these points, which are the key drivers, I think, from my perspective, that an organization would adopt BPM.
And so we would have people listening to this episode where they're on the same page as you. They understand it, they get it, but they're struggling to communicate this to their senior leaders. They're struggling to get that buy-in, that adoption. Maybe they're using terminology that's too technical. Maybe they're not speaking their language. Maybe they're not showing the return on investment, the yield. How do we as process practitioners communicate these reasons or these motivations or these drivers? How do we communicate this to our senior leaders so that they understand it, they get it, they're on the same page? I think you were saying before we jumped into it that that's one of the it's a challenge that you've faced in the past, and you're very familiar with that challenge of how do you get buy-in from senior leaders. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I think the most important, always BPM takes a backseat in some of the organizations. Some organizations are pretty much at the forefront. I think from my perspective, where there is low maturity in an organization when it comes to BPM, I think you need to think small and have a big vision though. So do something small at a use case level and have that agility to scale up when required. So when you demonstrate that you can run a BPM on one particular use case, and you can if you can demonstrate that they can, uh, it's aligned to the strategy of the organization, overall goals of the organization, um, and also if you can show that the approach was just not loose, but there was some sort of a structure to it. There was a framework attached to it. There was some sort of a methodology attached to it. Then the adoption of BPM, I think, within the organization, or the buy-in from the senior leadership team becomes a bit easier. Don't go big bang if they're not ready. Go small scale. Show the value, show the benefit, and scale it up as you go. And probably also make sure that if you can, have some influences on the go, adopt BPMN champions, that who can talk to the wider group across the organization, and pretty much give a sales pitch to it.
And when you say influencers and champions, are these process analysts that you've employed brought into the organisation, or are these other subject matter experts that you've convinced of the value of process, that they're not necessarily process analysts, but they've bought into the vision, they've bought into this idea?
It can be anybody, to be honest. The process analyst, process analysts, I think, can be a champion. It's by default, right? Because they are passionate about doing that piece of work. But what's more important is to find those SMEs, those interested parties across the organization. A good example would be change management. Probably some of them over there can be the influencers or the drivers of championing BPM, or any business SMEs who are passionate about BPM. They can be champions across their business areas, so on and so forth. So if we can identify those passionate BPM people or the employees within the organization, and that will be the best approach.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And apart from, I guess, this challenge of getting buy-in from your senior leaders, which I would say is very important, what are the other challenges an organisation may face when embarking on a BPM journey?
There are quite a few things there. Probably the challenges the organization will face. It's easy to bring in a resource and ask them to do a piece of work. But what will be more important is to have the right skill sets and competencies within the organization or within the team. If you are thinking of process excellence or a center of excellence space, then it's important to have the right capabilities, skill sets, and competencies. And also some of the challenges would be establishing BPM as a discipline. It's not only about process framework or method, but it has to be at a grassroots level. It has to be, there should be a discipline. It should be embedded as part of the DNA, the culture. That's when the BPM holistically becomes a winning situation for the organization. Communication also will be a big challenge, because quite oftenly we embark on process modeling exercise, but we don't anticipate the importance of communication as part of that exercise. Change management will play an important role there to communicate BPM across the organization for making it successful. And organizations, for them, the challenge is also the agility of the organization. If they are very flexible and they are open-minded, then probably it becomes a little more easier to adopt. Otherwise, it becomes a big challenge if they are not agile in the acceptance of the approach itself. Then it's, as I mentioned, I think some of the organizations, they go looking, okay, what's the BPM tool that we need to adopt? I would say, hey, keep the tool aside. Yes, important at some stage, but let's start talking about the right method, right approach, small things, competencies, skill sets. All these elements will matter first. Once we are mature and we have that capability, and then we can start talking about, okay, what's the toolkit that we need to grow and scale up as organizations are growing. We need to scale up our toolkits as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's fantastic. There are many organizations that jump to technology without having sort of the foundational elements in place. And I think, it doesn't serve them well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So obviously you listed off a number of sort of key challenges an organization will face when embarking on a BPM journey. It sounds like a lot, but obviously organizations value process management or there are organizations that do value process management because they understand the value and they know the return that is possible. So can you share with us a few, wins or case studies or examples of where business process management has been adopted and it has delivered significant value? Now, I'm talking whether it's you've got an example of a process was documented and it provided whatever transparency, or a process was improved and it was able to bring a process from 17 days down to 3 days in terms of time to conduct that process. Do you have examples like that? Because I think the audience that's listening, for some of them, they are seeing value with process management. For others, they're just embarking on that journey. And I think they do like to hear stories of where it's working in practice and where it is delivering value, because it's going to help them pitch it to their organization.
Sure. Look, there is, from a real live examples perspective, I think one of the aspects which not many think is the risk culture, how process management and the BPM is aligned to the risk culture of the organization. So in my previous organization, I think we put a greater emphasis on bringing in risk culture into the process, business process management side of it. So at that, as soon as we have risks as part of the standard protocol, that itself is a greater value to any organization from managing their auditing requirements or managing their internal auditing requirements as well. So that's one example that BPM has actually added value. In terms of process improvements, we did a piece of exercise for one of the organization in one of a process where we used Six Sigma as a toolkit to do process improvements, but not necessarily Six Sigma can be one of the tools. There can be value stream mapping as another toolkit, but we use Six Sigma and value stream mapping as a conjunction. We pretty much brought down one of the process. Let me not put it as brought down. Probably we reduced quite a bit of a waste time within the process by roughly about 1.5 days on a benefit process, if I have to call it in its true sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are the true kind of examples where we use it. But in generally, I think the more stronger focus is making sure that we have these process designs to make sure that there is a risk culture embedded into it. And as we all know, regulations and regulatories are constantly watching us these days. So it's very important that we have that in place, and that's a win on its own, and make sure that it ticks off all the regulatory obligations. Yeah. If you're talking about uh, wins in the organization of having implemented effective BPM? Is that what you're approaching towards? That's another question, perhaps, or I can lean towards that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's good to talk about the possible and the potential wins, and then those real life examples like you've just touched on about risks, the risk culture to do with BPM. I think it's good because it helps. We've only got so very little time for this conversation, but it helps the audience start to spark ideas and help get them thinking about, are these things that I'm considering? Are these things that I'm where we're doing at our organization, or is this something I need to explore further, and the potential and the possibility here? But yeah, let's go into those, the biggest wins you see an organization could realize by adopting BPM.
Probably one point I might have forgotten. There is also what we call as process. When we do process modeling, there is tangible benefits and intangible benefits. So there has been many instances where when we embark on process modeling, there is many intangible benefits that we usually don't see the value immediately, but there is a downstream impact on tangible benefits. So in my examples with all the process modeling in the previous organizations, it was more so intangible benefits such as improving customer experience, as an example, or improving our member journey across the life cycle of their journey within the organization. So those intangible benefits also adds value, and that's been part and parcel of what I've done in the past as well. So just wanted to touch on that. But okay, going back to the next question, that the biggest wins side
well,
of it.
Sorry, Chirag, just on that, are the intangible benefits, are they harder to pitch to the senior leaders than the tangible ones? Are they harder to, I guess, you get your foot in the door with BPM, and maybe they're benefits that come later on, or what would you say?
It's much harder because most of the organizations or senior leadership team would want to see what's the ROI, and that's straight linking into tangible benefits, right? In some ways we can, but it's harder to bring up a use case to inform them that actually there are multiple intangible benefits that we have that leads to probably more customer satisfaction, probably more retention. Therefore, so that's a bigger challenge for any of us to kind of embark on, and covering that off with our senior leadership straight away. But as I said, if organizations are agile and they're open-minded, probably they would understand and adopt this way sooner than later.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Great. So yeah, let's dive into those biggest wins.
Biggest wins. Yeah, sure. Look, I just mentioned improved customer experience and customer satisfaction. So that's one of the wins that organizations can see by adopting BPM. Internal efficiencies, consistency, and growth. When I say consistency, when I say growth, they are again leading intangible benefits to probably a tangible at some point, if you map them correctly, like retention and so on and so forth, due to improved customer experience. And also it touched on better compliance by managing risks and establishing controls. So I think that's a very key and the most important bit from a process perspective. And also a better management of business continuity planning sessions. Right? In today's world, it's important due to COVID. Organizations never know, they might shut down at one given point all of a sudden, and there has to be a robust business continuity planning in place. And for that to happen, process BPM plays a very critical role as well. So that and also improved market competition. If we have embedded this as a practice in our grassroots levels, I think our competition improves in comparison to with other organizations.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, for those that are listening to this, these terminology and this language, it's so important when communicating to different people in the organization, especially the senior leaders. They're not passionate, or they don't care so much about process as much as they care about the challenges and the pain points and the problems that they're trying to solve. It's, I heard the analogy once, it's like going to a doctor and the doctor is reading out the list of ingredients that are in the Panadol, and you're sitting there being like, I don't care what's in it. Is it going to fix my headache? Is it going to fix this? This is the problem. I don't want or need to hear the list of ingredients that don't even make sense to me. And so we need to think about the language you're using as well. Like, are we talking about improving customer experience, customer satisfaction, internal efficiency, employee satisfaction, improved market competition? These are the levers, or these are the drivers that your senior leaders will want to discuss and talk about. But Chirag, as well as convincing senior leaders, how do we bring the rest of the business along this journey? How do we bring the front end users or the front end employees, the ones that are at the coal face, the ones that are doing the process tasks and activities? How do we bring them along for this journey when we as process practitioners are going to them and saying, hey, I know that you've been doing the same thing for the last 2, 3, 5 years, but we're actually going to fully change it up now. We're actually going to give part of your role to a bot, or we're going to automate it, or we're going to do something. How do you bring the rest of the business along for this journey? I guess the ultimate goal is so that they're on board with the idea, they take ownership of it, and we want as little resistance as possible.
Yeah, that's an important one, because it's this question, what's in for me, right? within the business areas. I think for that to happen, I mentioned one thing is communication. So change management plays a very critical role there in making sure that the business units are with us. And also making sure that they are part of our journey from the go start. That's very important. Make them part of it. Make them part of the DNA that you are trying to establish. And that'll play a very critical role in making sure that they are on board and they are with us in this journey. And that'll be a success story. I think those two critical important points. The other bit, as I mentioned, there might be some tangible or intangible benefits that are return on investments that we can discuss about. But more importantly, it's the people that matter more so than benefits at the go start itself. That'll definitely come down the track. But for them to be on our side, it needs to. They should be part of us. Yes.
Yeah, great. No, that's good. And then looking to the future. Obviously, at this point in time, every organization is at a different maturity level when it comes to how they manage their business processes. There are some very pioneering organizations out there that we can learn a lot from because they've been trialing and erroring, if I could say it like that. They've been adopting new techniques, new practices. They've got their foundational elements in place. They've fostered a really good culture there of continuous improvement. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where organizations are, I guess, trying to keep their head above the water. They've had a turbulent last 2 to 3 years with the pandemic. Supply chains have been disrupted. A lot of chaos has happened. And some businesses are still trying to come out alive, so to speak. So everyone's at a different, I guess, maturity level right now. But what trends are you noticing when you look to the next 2, 3, 5 years? What does the future of BPM look like, and what's your biggest piece of advice or biggest encouragement for those organizations, maybe that at a lower maturity level, when they look to the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's a highly evolving space, business process management at the moment. I think the going trend would be, it's not about process modeling anymore. So it's process modeling is one artifact or a document that we would need, but the bigger picture is around automation. How do we digitization? So those will play an important role in terms of than just process modeling. How do we customer experience will play a massive role. Not many of us we end up doing process modeling from what we know operationally inside, but then what about the front end? It's BPM is no more the back end. It is also the front end. So bringing customer experience as business process management together is another important element that will be required. It's a trend going forward. Of course, process innovation, that's constantly evolving. Let it be technology, let it be tools, whatever it is. There is constantly innovation that can happen. The future trend is also not about, again, just process automation, process digitization is definitely the trend. But also I say process mobilization. When I say mobilization, it's mobile applications that play a role in bringing processes as a future trend. Organizations will start embarking on building multiple apps, mobile apps, to cater to the front end and the back end processes within the organization. So that will be a very big future trend I see. Of course, we are all talking about advanced process mining capability. I think many organizations now have embarked on process mining, but yet not many have adopted this because of just the cost and the benefit factor. But I feel that's playing a very important role, because when we talk about process mining, it's about bringing BPM and data together and understanding the process in reality, in real go versus what has been designed or mapped. So let us, as an example, we have mapped a current state process, but having process mining will give us a better understanding of the future state, understanding the true events that happen. And that's a big, and most of the tools you see are focusing heavy on process mining going down, and data plays a very important role. The other bit is also many organizations have experimented this, and also I think there's still some time to learn more about this space. Is cognitive recognition. So there are many softwares which have got cognitive capability. It's, I think, down the track, if for the organizations to be so matured that we can have artificial intelligence, cognitive playing a role, bringing human touch and automation together, that will be another future trend. But also, to your last bit of the question, one piece of advice I would give is, yeah, they're all fantastic. They're all beautiful future trends that we can look forward to. But it's no use if you have not got your basics correctly, or you're not set up yourself with the right basics. As an example, don't go thinking about RPA, replacing bots on a process design or a process model or a given activity in a process design, because RPA will be inefficient or if you place a boat on a process design, it'll be inefficient unless you've actually gone and you have got the process model or the process itself to its utmost capability in its efficiency. You know what I mean? So if you can make sure that your processes are efficient first, and then understand how data plays a role, where is the bottleneck, and then you can try to think about placing RPA, onto this process model, or replacing with a bot in a given process. So first get the basics right before getting or embarking into these beautiful technologies which is out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. It reminds me of the many horror stories I have heard of, bots that have been deployed, and missing lots of cases, or whatever organization it might be, and just making a complete mess of the experience. And so you're trying to bring something in that's meant to alleviate pain and make things a lot more efficient and effective, and make the experience more enjoyable for the customer, the patient, the internal employee, and it ends up making it far worse, because the process, as you were saying, hasn't been optimized. It hasn't been really, I guess, critiqued or analyzed before that bot's been deployed. So, I get the basics right, 100% on the same page.
No, absolutely. They are important. I mean, they're those technologies out there, RPA, they're good. They do an excellent job, but it becomes a graveyard if you don't do your process optimization correctly.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's great. So yeah, we've covered a range of different sort of topics in this 30 or 35-minute conversation. I'm sure that our audience has been gleaning a lot. I've certainly been gleaning a lot from this conversation. There's obviously a lot there that we can continue to unpack. But for any of the listeners that maybe their question hasn't been answered, how can they, I guess, ask that question to you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they connect with you? Is that something that you do? And how are they able to, I guess, continue the conversation moving forward?
I'm happy to take any questions on my network, on my LinkedIn network. But I might have some lag time in my response. Bear with me. But happy to have a chat, happy to have a conversation. I love I'm quite passionate in this space. So anyone's got any recommendations, suggestions, just a discussion point, or if they've got anything that we can share and learn, that'll be fantastic through the platform, of course. All my details are there.
That's fantastic. Well, guys, for those that are listening, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have enjoyed it, please go leave us a rating and a review on whatever channel you're listening to this on right now. We would really appreciate that. It's going to help the podcast get seen more and heard more. So thank you for that. And Chirag, thanks for sitting down with me today and having this conversation. It's been an absolute privilege for me. Looking forward to seeing all of the feedback and the activity that happens because of this conversation today.
Not a problem. Thank you, Daniel. Again, thank you for having me. Hopefully, it might add some value across whoever is seeing or listening to this podcast. So, looking forward to build my network in the space. Yeah. Thank you.